Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and Brexit is already harming our ability to produce goods of national security importance, like pharmaceuticals, like food. So why should a vital resource like steel be any different? And as if by magic, the government have decreed that protections for UK steel making are to be removed. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So I've said before that Brexit is being delivered in instalments. And another one is now due. Actually, there's a whole raft of them due in the next month. But as part of the EU, there were a number of protections in place for our steel industry to prevent what's called dumping from Chinese producers. Part of our Brexit agreement meant keeping these protections in place for 6 months. Well, in a couple of days, the 6 months is up and those protections are due to expire. The Conservatives are arguing about promoting free trade around the world, you see, but their particular brand of free trade means allowing other countries free access to the British market without us even gaining any significant access into theirs. Both the Japanese and Australia trade deals are great examples of this. But just as with farming, there is no way for our steel industry to survive without protections in place. Protection is tariffs and so on. British farmers can't compete with our style of farming, with the intensive farming methods elsewhere. And steel production can't compete against the almost total lack of regulations for producers in China or India. But before I discuss some of the consequences, including some local Brexit implications, let's consider why the Conservatives are doing this. Now, this is speculation, of course, but I think ultimately there are two reasons, maybe 2.5 reasons. The first is that the Conservatives need to talk up their environmental credentials. We all know they don't actually believe in doing anything about it. Steel production is, by its nature, quite polluting, very polluting, in fact. There's so much you can do about it. It would take major amounts of investments to realistically significantly reduce the level of pollution from steel production. It's not like power stations where there's more options available. But if our steel is sourced from China, then our steel production facilities close down and we are no longer generating that pollution. So it looks like the government can say, we've reduced our carbon footprint. We haven't really. The pollution is still being generated for the steel we are using, but we shift it to China. We outsource our pollution to China, which is what a lot of the world does anyway. The UK pollution figures go down. Same as the farmed goods that we'll soon be importing from Australia and the United States. We can pin the carbon footprint on those countries because we're not producing the carbon. It's those. Even though we're consuming it, the carbon is being produced because of what we're consuming. It's being produced for our goods, but we get to blame someone else for it. The Conservatives are all about passing the buck. So I think that is one major reason. It helps us offset carbon footprint without actually doing anything to offset carbon footprint. If anything, could make it worse, because then more of our steel is produced when environmental regulations are, if anything, lower, virtually non-existent potentially. I think the second reason is cost. Like, remove tariffs and it'll be cheaper for Tory donating construction firms to purchase their steel. Of course it will. The tariffs don't exist to raise taxes, but to price foreign steel out of our market. So Tory donor firms save money, they make more profit, really as simple as that. Only there is a cost because steel is a resource of national security importance. Being reliant on imports is always a bit, you never really want to be reliant on imports in general for something that is important to you. But being reliant on a foreign power for it that is someone whom we might expect to have a rocky diplomatic relationship from time to time, that's really dodgy. Take, for example, you think to yourself, why is it that the major powers of Europe let Vladimir Putin of Russia get away with what he gets away with? Do you think it's because they're largely reliant upon the oil and gas that comes from Russia? And this is also why Russia's not at all happy with the EU's moves to wean themselves off that dependency. Because as soon as they've weaned themselves off that dependency, all of a sudden they can take more robust action against Russia. It's just how it works. You really don't want to be reliant upon an important resource because it limits your diplomatic options. You know, our Brexit trade policies are moving us into a position where we're going to become more reliant upon imports for resources of real importance: steel, food, energy, medicines. It's a complete madness. But Conservatives do not think about the long-term interests of the country, only the short-term benefits of those whom they wish to pay back with our money for the donations that they received, which put them in power, which they hope will put them in power again. And the half a reason, I think, may be down to employment. Because look at what's happening right now. Wealthy business owners in, say, the hospitality sector are complaining that they can't get staff. We can't get the staff. Yeah, the workers gone. We see the same thing in America. President Biden, you may have seen this, talking about this issue at a press conference where he said, this is a legitimate question. And I keep being asked, we can't get the workers. And he leaned into the microphone and says, and I say, yeah, pay them more. You know, that's what you can't get workers, pay them more. Our head of government is not following the White House's lead on this one, but we are moving to a point where staff shortages in industries that traditionally benefit from being able to hire and fire disturbingly easily are now struggling to get staff at all. They still haven't cottoned on that paying a decent wage improves their odds of getting staff. Now, this does not suit the Conservatives. They like high unemployment. They like to hide the fact there's high unemployment, but they need the high unemployment because that gives business owners more power to suppress wages and even working conditions. When you suddenly shed a huge chunk of the workforce, that gives more power to the workers. That's not right. All of a sudden, instead of being able to say, if you don't like it, you can leave and I'll hire someone tomorrow, it's more a case that the worker says, if you don't want to give me these working conditions or you don't want to pay me properly, I'll go and find another job. Business owners don't like it that way around. The point is that you might think that a trade policy that collapses our industries like farming, fishing, steel and so on is bad. But it will mean more unemployment and that the remaining businesses have easier access to workers for a lower wage and poorer working conditions. Not that I think that is the thinking behind the steel issue. That's maybe just a fringe benefit, hence potentially half a reason. But I live not very far away from a major steel producer in the UK. There are only so many now. I used to live right in the town, Scunthorpe, but moved recently. I'm not far away now. It's a town that relies upon its steel industry for jobs. Those jobs have been declining all too rapidly of late. It's been going for a few decades now. Nearly went under completely a couple of years ago in Scunthorpe when the government refused to bail it out. They tried to blame EU rules for that, state aid rules. You remember that? Even though the likes of France and Germany spend way more on state aid than we do. There was no breach there. Also, despite the fact that they have bailed out other companies in other sectors, and Italy, a more committed EU member, bailed out a much larger steel producer, spending much more than we would have had to a few years ago. So it was a complete nonsense. But the point is that the plant at Scunthorpe was saved eventually by being bought by a Chinese company, ironically. And they had major plans. Well, as far as I know, they still do. All looking good. In 2019, this staunchly Labour area flipped to the Conservatives, like so many other red wall seats, because of Brexit. Now their new Conservative MP, Holly Mumby-Croft, had a choice to make. Stand up for the major industry in her town or stand by while her government abandoned it. Labour triggered a vote in Parliament to preserve the protections for our steel industry. They shouldn't have had to. The government should have made it clear before now that they were going to maintain the protections, that they weren't going to let them lapse at the end of this month. But they didn't. So Labour forced a vote on the issue. The new Scunthorpe MP abstained. Now, what got me was not just that she was abandoning her town, but she was being politically naive about it. Easiest political decision of any MP's life is to vote in favour of your constituency's interests, especially when your vote will not actually make a difference. You know, if you have to vote against the party whip, you can absolutely get away with it if it's on a matter of local interest and the vote's going to go your party's way anyway. You know, she could have voted with Labour. The vote would have been lost anyway, but she would be on record as having made a stand in the interests of her local area. No internal party action would have been taken against her because it's understood that you vote against the whip if it means standing up for your constituents. After all, Several Conservative MPs in agricultural constituencies voted against the government's agriculture bill. They voted with Labour on that. No action was taken against them. Of course not. Because they get to look like they were standing up for their community, and the government win the vote anyway because there weren't enough rebels to make a difference. Now, Mumby Croft, by abstaining, hopes to smudge the issue when it inevitably comes up at the next general election, when the town starts to decline. Maybe she hopes to say that the government's levelling up plans will be bringing more jobs into the area. This will not occur. Maybe she hopes to say that she urged the Prime Minister to drop the plans. If the plans weren't dropped, then that is worthless. Now, I don't know what's going to happen in Scunthorpe. I can't imagine a Chinese company wants to pay more to produce steel in the UK if it can produce it for less in China and then just ship it over. Where there is the greatest risk is actually, though, not Scunthorpe but Tees Valley, which has also seen a crop of new Conservative MPs who, like Mumby Croft, argued against the government's position but failed to back it up with action in a vote. Mumby Croft, back to Scunthorpe, I'm mentioning this all the time because it's my local area, she said that she has on record her opposition to the moves. So that's what she intends to do at the next general election, to say, no, it's all on record, I opposed it. But here's the thing. If you stand up in Parliament and you say a thing, yes, it's recorded. You could look it up on Hansard, it's recorded. But it can be quite tricky to find. If you don't know when the debate was held, if you're trying to look back several years to a debate and you're not quite sure what it was on or when it was or something like that, it can be quite difficult to find that MP's recorded statement. Not impossible, tricky. It takes time. What's a lot easier to find is an MP's voting record. So if you verbally stand up and say something in Parliament, which achieves nothing, by the way, you standing up and saying something doesn't achieve anything. Yeah, it's recorded, it doesn't achieve anything. But you say you oppose something, but then you don't vote against it, and the vote, of course, is binding, then your record is one of not opposing it at all. She will say, I'm on record as opposing it. Someone else will just say, here's the voting record. Your name is not on the ayes. You didn't vote for this. And that includes the new Tory MP of Hartlepool, whose first act as their Member of Parliament, flipping again from Labour to the Conservatives, was to stand back and allow the destruction of their local industry. Still, the people of Hartlepool were warned about this. A few years ago, I was talking to someone who worked at the Scunthorpe plant. He wasn't in favour of Brexit, but plenty of his workmates were, as they will have been in the Tees Valley, inevitably. And I asked him, so why do these workmates of yours, why are they not worried about the problems it will cause them with chaos in international trade? They might have import tariffs on raw materials that are basically sourced from overseas, most of them. They might face export tariffs on some of their products, although at Scunthorpe a lot of it is for use in the UK market, but not all of it. Or that the EU protections on the UK market might be stripped away. And he said, as far as his workmates were concerned, that's a problem for the suits, he said. Of course it's not. If there's no solution to the problem, then it's a problem for everyone because the plant closes. It was already struggling to turn a profit whilst being inside the EU. Just while I'd been living in this area, its ownership has changed hands several times. What chance does it have with EU protections removed? Now, in theory, this decision has not yet been made. At the end of this month, the government will announce it. It has to, because at the end of this month, if it doesn't say something, then those protections just automatically go. But given that they clearly put pressure on inexperienced Tory MPs to not vote against removing tariffs, knowing that it will make them harder for them to win their seats at the next election, it looks like the government are determined to go ahead with this. And another industry will potentially fall, and I don't mean suffer from Brexit. Almost all industries will suffer from Brexit, but some will be completely obliterated. Steel making may well be one of them. And with steel production, you can't just close a plant down and then just restart it a bit later. Once you shut it down, it's a hell of a job to start it up again. Basically, it won't happen. Much of the steelworks as you drive around Scunthorpe, already largely wasteland. It's been in decline, like I say, for some time. But even the relatively fewer jobs in the town are vitally important. They lose the rest of those and you're talking an 80s style ghost town in the making. Except the 80s ghost towns at least had the dignity of not voting for their fate. The 20s ghost towns will actually have voted for it. It will be a ruin that they collectively brought upon themselves. But that won't help anyone, will it? But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.